The Conservatives have picked an interim leader in the House of Commons for the spring sitting. After a full-day caucus meeting, Andrew Scheer was chosen. This comes after Pierre Poilievre lost his long-held Ottawa area seat in the federal election. CBC's Olivia Stefanovic is following that meeting for us from Ottawa. Olivia, the decision was, I guess, not a surprising one. He's certainly a familiar face. What do we know about what happened today in caucus?
Well, Sarah, Andrew Scheer's name has been floating around for the last few days, ever since the federal election, as someone who could be possibly tapped to fill in as interim leader while Pierre Poilievre tries to regain a seat in the House of Commons. And this isn't much of a surprise since Scheer was Conservative leader before. In fact, he ran in the 2019 federal election campaign against then Liberal leader Justin Trudeau. And while Scheer lost, he stayed with the party, stayed on as MP, and became House leader under Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. And in fact, the two go way back. Poilievre and Scheer actually started together in the House of Commons back in 2004 while they were in their 20s. They were rookie MPs back then. And now 2 decades later, they are essentially running the Conservative Party. So Scheer is seen as a Poilievre loyalist, somebody who's a steady hand who can keep things running as Poilievre tries to get back in there and take back his parliamentary duties. Scheer confirmed the news today that he is going to be interim opposition leader, and he also spoke about his priorities for the spring session and specifically how he plans to approach the U.S.-Canada relationship.
We want a good deal for Canada. We want these tariffs these tariffs need to stop. These threats of tariffs, the threats of annexation, all that needs to stop. And so we're going to do our very best as official opposition to hold the government to account, but to do what we can to help facilitate that. And we'll see what the government brings forward. So in the days and weeks ahead.
So Poilievre he's announced that he intends to run in an upcoming by-election in rural Alberta. This after Conservative MP Damien Carrick announced that he intends to resign so Poilievre can take his seat. This is one of the safest seats for the Tories in the country. And that way Poilievre can come back and then take over as both party leader and opposition leader in the House of Commons, perhaps by the fall. Prime Minister Mark Carney has indicated that he plans to call this by-election as soon as possible, so we are waiting for that date. In the meantime, Poilievre did speak to reporters today for the first time since the federal election, and he spoke about the losses that his party saw, but also the gains. Take a listen.
Well, what we learned, I think we all learned, is that the map has changed dramatically. Like if you had told me that, for one, that we would get 41% of the vote a couple of years ago, I would have said, wow, that's ambitious. But if you told me that we would get 41% of the vote and still not win, I would have said, you're crazy.
Now, it is true that the Conservatives, they got 43% of the popular vote, or 41% actually of the popular vote. That's just 2% less than the Liberals, which received 43% of the popular vote. Now, despite that, and the fact that they did gain 24 seats in the House of Commons, it obviously wasn't enough to cross the finish line.
Olivia, this was a really long caucus meeting that took place. Is there any indication that they have decided on any other changes beside appointing this interim leader?
Yeah, well, it took all day, this caucus meeting, and there will be a formal election review following this meeting that took place today. But what I can tell you is that MPs decided that they want to, well, they did adopt the Reform Act in their caucus meeting today. That is a piece of legislation that allows MPs to act more independently and also possibly trigger a leadership review. Now, keep in mind, Poilievre will face a leadership review no matter what at the next Conservative convention. And from what we are hearing from MPs and from Conservative strategists is that they do not expect Poilievre will be ousted. At least we aren't hearing from anyone publicly that they want him gone as Conservative leader. So in the meantime, Conservatives are trying to figure out what they can do to make sure that they can win the next federal election. Here's what one Conservative strategist had to say about that.
I think certainly the party needs to shift on how it speaks to voters in certain ways. For example, women voters, how do we do that? How do we access back the over 60 voters? How much of that driving over to Carney is a real thing, right? Is that a one-time, we want someone to deal with Donald Trump and those voters migrate back to the Conservative Party as they have been for decades? Or is that a real new realignment that we need to deal with?
Now, behind closed doors, some Conservatives are laying the blame at the party's campaign manager, Jenny Byrne. Poilievre gave no indication today that he plans to cut ties with Byrne or that he himself plans to leave at any point as Conservative leader. He did speak, though, about listening to Canadians, traveling across the country, holding town halls and getting feedback from people. And he also spoke about doubling down on his message, the message that saw his party make gains in this federal election, one that's focused on the cost of living and tackling crime. Sarah.
CBC's Olivia Stefanovich in Ottawa. Thanks, Olivia.
You're welcome.
Now, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre did wish Prime Minister Carney luck this morning, saying that he hopes for an end to the tariffs. My next guest has been in these sorts of meetings before, both the kind of Conservative caucus, but also what we saw play out in the Oval Office. Peter MacKay is the former Minister of National Defence and also a former Minister of Foreign Affairs under Prime Minister Stephen Harper, joining us today from Kings Head, Nova Scotia. Great to speak with you. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure, Sarah. Thank you.
So, like I say, you're certainly no stranger to these both kinds of meetings that we've just been talking about. But given what played out in Washington, D.C., let me start there. I'm sure you were watching and have taken in that meeting and perhaps the Prime Minister's press conference afterward. What's your take? Was this a best-case scenario? Could things have gone a little better?
Oh, I think they can always go better when you're dealing with this particular president. And therein lies the challenge. The uncertainty, the sort of rambling discourse that we saw is quite common. But Prime Minister Carney, to give the credit to him, came out relatively unscathed, although without really any concessions around tariffs, without being able to head off the references to the president's desire to take over Canada. And some of the other rather derogatory remarks. I mean, keep in mind that it was just this past weekend where he wouldn't rule out using military force, it's hard to believe that we're even having this discussion. But Prime Minister Carney went there, did his best, and you could tell that there were moments of great discomfort on his part.
Prior to the election, we haven't seen, a lot of supportive comments coming from the Conservative leader for his opposition and the Liberals. You're someone who campaigned for Pierre Poilievre. This morning, we heard him wish Mark Carney luck in this meeting. How important is it that he, as opposition leader, does get behind Carney, at least on this issue?
Well, I think it is time to down partisan tools and put the country first, as Pierre Poilievre himself has said. And yet we saw, even in this exchange today, President Trump take some credit for the fact that Mr. Carney won this election. So that's grating on everybody, regardless of what party you support. That kind of external injection into our electoral process is unwelcome and unwanted. But I do believe that it is time now, of course, to put the issues around our national security, our economy, of course, our efforts to diversify trade, domestic issues, including the one of national unity that the news station just referenced earlier tonight.
So then how does the Conservative Party, which, as I say, traditionally, or at least prior to the election, there seems to have been a bit of a shift in tone, and I'm wondering, what do we expect from the Conservative Party moving forward, as this is a main file, certainly, for all of Canada, the idea of tariffs. But how does Pierre Poilievre behave or change his tone, or does he, do you think? But there does seem to, I think you can acknowledge, seem to be a little bit of a change in tone so far, in that we're hearing from both Pierre Poilievre as well as many other Conservative MPs, and that's not something that has traditionally happened, at least not in the years leading up to this.
Well, I think it is a different time. We're at a much different moment with the election just a week behind us, a recognition now that we have to make Parliament, for sure, work better. And so the job of His Majesty's loyal opposition is to constructively critique and in some cases support the government as they navigate these uncharted waters vis-a-vis the Americans. But there are other geopolitical forces happening as well. And I would point out that this has to flow both ways. I think both the government and the opposition have to demonstrate to Canadians that they are going to set a different tone. And that means focusing, I think, on some of the domestic challenges that exist. pipelines and energy discussion, national security and sovereignty in the Arctic and at our border. These are things that are good for Canada, regardless of what the president may say or may demand. These are things that our political parties and leaders have to focus on.
Before I let you go, I have to ask you about the Conservative caucus meeting. It was a long one. We don't know everything, of course, that was discussed behind closed doors. We do know that they have put Andrew Scheer in a position as temporary leader. He's a familiar face. He's been the leader before. Was he the right candidate? Should they not have perhaps tried someone new?
Well, I think he has the experience. He was also a speaker in the House of Commons, which is seen as a more neutral position, and one that may help bring down the temperature as far as their presentation in the House of Commons. And he has been leader, as you noted, and therefore has that gravitas, if you will, in terms of doing the job of the opposition and keeping the government in check. But I am hopeful, again, that we'll see a less partisan tone, a more productive tone from all sides, all corners of the House, to move along these important files. There is a lot of external pressure, but there's a lot of internal pressure, particularly from Alberta and the situation there. And Mr. Scheer, Mr. Poilievre, and others, I think, will figure prominently in that. At least they have the opportunity to do so, given their Western roots.
Peter MacKay, former Minister of National Defence, also former Minister of Foreign Affairs under Prime Minister Stephen Harper, joining us from Kings Head, Nova Scotia. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Sarah. Thank you.